everyone very much for coming. I have the great pleasure of welcoming everyone to this Atlantic Council conference. It's going to discuss risk and opportunity in emerging technologies, cybersecurity, private-public sector partnerships, and how to boost European resilience in the digital cyber domain. My name is Korewa. I am the director of the Atlantic Council's Europe Center Warsaw office. Very much looking forward to the interesting discussions today. And as you all know, technology has always had a geopolitical dimension, but now, today, given Russia's brutal, unprovoked aggression against Ukraine and the emergence of China as an actor that challenges the world's rules-based system, the relationship between technology and geopolitics is closer now and more important than ever, I believe. In response to some of the challenges in cyberspace, the European Union is putting together regulations that are supposed to set the guardrails for the use of digital critical technologies. And at the Atlantic Council at the Europe Center, we have a long focused work on trying to encourage Europe's role as a digital regulator and agenda setter. And so today we have an amazing group of panelists that are going to discuss these interesting topics. Two panels, one on the geopolitics of AI and one on the lessons from the war in Ukraine on public-private partnerships in cybersecurity. So I'd like to very much thank the panelists for coming today. And I would also like to introduce our partner and a very good friend, Mr. David Dixon, who is the partner of the Dentons office. But before I let David go on stage, I also have to have wouldn't it be right if I didn't thank all of our partners, without whose generous support, none of the work that we do at the Atlantic Council here would be possible. I'm thinking of Marko from Google, Maciej Witucki, Lewiatan, Dariusz Meduski, Andrzej Kozłowski, Beata Daszyńska-Mużyczka, Baronie Rada, Jarosław Grzesiak, LOT, Polish Airlines, and CEO Michał and Rafał Brzoska. We are extremely grateful for your support. Also, I would like to thank AmCham Poland for the support with this event, and their chairman, Tony Hausch, who is also our new Europe Center fellow, and my good friend, Gigitashvili, from the amazing Atlantic Council Digital Forensics Research Lab. Tony and Givi are going to support this event by moderating. And I'll finally, before I stop talking, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's event is on the record. It's being recorded. It's not live. We're not doing it live, but it's going to be recorded, and we're going to broadcast that through the Atlantic Council channels. And we have two sessions, as I said. During each session, you, the audience, will have the chance to ask our panel interesting questions. And I hope you do, because we have a lot of brain power in this room, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. And with that, I would like to give the floor over to David. Over to you.
Even though I'm a lawyer, I won't talk as long as Aaron did. First, I really want to welcome everybody here to Dentons offices on behalf of our managing partners who are not here, but who support not only these types of events, but also our membership and partnership with Atlantic Council, and it's a very important part of our business. That would be Anna Puszto and Bartek Kordecka, both under the weather, but send their regards. My name, as Aaron said, Dave Dixon. I'm the co-chairman of the Dentons-led NATO Eastern Flank Legal Alliance, which covers the entire eastern flank of NATO, and we're butts up against Russia, including Ukraine and Turkey, which is close to what that would be as well. We've had a long and good history with Atlantic Council. Chris Fetzer in the United States is on the board of Atlantic Council and has been a major player for Atlantic Council for years, and we hope to achieve the same status ultimately here in Poland and in Europe. So once again, welcome. One more housekeeping thing. If you need to wash your hands, go down the hallway to the reception. Take a right where the funky stone-like things are there. Don't trip on them. That's mainly what they do. And then you will see a door off to the left with a dark corridor. That's where you can wash your hands. So with more further ado, enjoy this. It's going to be good.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron, for your introductory remarks and for introducing the topic. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's panel discussion on risks and opportunities, geopolitics and AI. My name is Givi, and I'm working with Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, where we investigate online influence campaigns and produce public reporting on what's going on in our information spaces. But today we are talking about AI and geopolitics. So this is a topic which sits at the intersection of technology, society, and also policy. So artificial intelligence is not just, I would say, a technological frontier, but it's also a geopolitical one. And today we are going to explore how AI shapes geopolitical landscape. What are the key, let's say, trends in this AI race? We have distinguished speakers who have their expertise and also diverse perspectives on this topic. And more specifically, we will be focusing on Europe and Europe's role in this race, as well as we will cover topics related to regulations, AI ethics, innovations in the field of AI, as well as how AI benefits can be harnessed for economic growth. And with that, I would like to introduce you our distinguished speakers. So today we have Ambassador Tadeusz Chomicki, Ambassador for Cyber and Tech Affairs of Poland. We have Eglė Markevičiūtė, Head of Digital and Innovation Policy at Consumer Choice Center, also former Deputy Minister of Economy and Innovations of Lithuania. We also have today Michał Jaworski, Member of Management Board at Microsoft Poland. We have Marko Grobelnik, Chief Technical Officer at International Research Center on Artificial Intelligence. Marko is also a founder and deputy head of Laboratory of Artificial Intelligence at Jozef Stefan Institute. And we have Anna Pastwa, postdoctoral research at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, first I'm going to ask you an opening question, which will be question to everyone, and then later on we will have a second round of questions where I'll be asking more individual questions relevant for your experience, things you do, and we hope that these answers will give us a better understanding of where Europe is in this AI race. But as the geopolitical landscape of artificial intelligence evolves, we see that the United States and China emerged as front runners in this AI race, and they managed to use AI for, let's say, commercial innovation, military achievements, as well as national security. In Europe, the conversation around AI currently focuses mostly on regulations and setting standards, not just for European countries, but also setting the standards for, let's say, on the international domain, on international stage. But at the same time, there are growing concerns that Europe may not be fully independent, and its dependence on AI technologies in a long-term perspective can create some risks for Europe. So I would like to ask you at the beginning to share your thoughts on where does Europe stand in this AI race? How Europe positions itself in the international AI arena? And what are the strategies adopted by European countries to navigate challenges and opportunities also in AI field? Ambassador Chomicki, let's start from you if you don't mind.
I don't have a choice, I guess. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to be a little bit stressed today because I see a lot of a bunch of much better experts sitting on this panel, but also in the audience here. So I will be very diplomatic sometimes. Plus, because it is being recorded, I need to be diplomatic as well. But let's put it like this. Of course, there is a strategic question of dependence or self-sufficiency or sovereignty in different areas. And we have been discussed that in Europe for a long time. France was the leading country to start discussions on sovereignty in the defense area of Europe years back. And then we had the discussions in the possible sovereignty in digital world, European sovereignty. And now we are trying to address the question of our sovereignty when it comes to AI and emerging disruptive technology using the NATO language, like quantum physics, etc. I think whether we can be independent, sovereign in that areas is it's a little bit artificial question. Depends from certain perspective. What I mean here is with whom we are standing and who is standing on the other side is more important question. For the very practical reasons, we are not independent from transatlantic relations. Even starting with the conventional weapons, something ancient compared to AI. The Russian war in Ukraine, the new phase that started 2 years ago, showed how important it is to have this constant cooperation on the in the transatlantic area. When it comes to supplying Ukraine, there's a simple, sometimes sophisticated, but still kinetic and very conventional weapons. So we need it, and we wouldn't be able to provide Ukraine with necessary resources by ourselves in Europe. And the delayed decision by the American lawmakers make it really difficult for Ukraine, but for us in Europe as well. And what we can do is to press or to appeal to the US lawmakers to not to play this topic as an internal part of the game, not being diplomatic. When it comes to more advanced technologies, our dependency is still here because we don't have enough semiconductors to start with in Europe. So for the very simple reason, we need to be in a cooperative mode with our partners. When it comes to AI, it's more complex. I don't think there's anybody who really knows what is the potential of AI in the US, in China, in Europe. There are some approximate assumptions what is the potential. But with the AI, I think if we focus on the big companies, we can judge by the big companies, some of them being in this room. But AI is interesting development. It's still in this stage where a small company can make a difference. Right? When it comes to new advanced generations of aircrafts, a small company cannot make any difference. There's only a few companies in the world which can make them. When it comes to advanced digital tools, we have a big tech dominating the market, but still it's possible to develop it outside of the big tech. When it comes to the AI, I think personally, I'm not experts who study it for the job daily will maybe correct me, but I think here it is still possible to make a difference. So when I talk to my British colleagues and he asked me about the potential of AI in Poland, I said, I don't know, really, because there may be a small company and I'm sure there is some niche areas where Poland has opportunities or we have some possible developments that even the big tech in the US does not have, or the state-fueled companies in China do not have, because it's still a little bit not developed area where a smaller player can make a difference with some innovative thinking. So my hope in Europe is that even though the size of any European companies dealing with the advanced technologies is smaller than the US-based companies, whereas we do not provide that kind of support that the Chinese government provides for the Chinese companies, we can still manage to be an important player. And to conclude this remark, I would say I'm very honest when I speak at the Atlantic Council, and I think I will make a remark that in a very different context I've made already in some other meeting. Europe needs to build our self-sufficiency as much as we can. not because we should do it against the US or against Canada or other partners outside Europe, but A, we don't know who's going to run these countries in the future. The overall politics, which is not my area of specialization, is worrisome for me, and we can see the AI influencing electoral processes now. What will be the result of this for the countries as important as the US or less important or different countries? We don't know, and we have to be prepared for that. So we cannot build our dependence based on the fact that nothing's going to change. We have to be prepared that friendships or partnerships can change. Secondly, I talked to my good colleague and friend, Ambassador Fick, Ambassador at Large for the Cyber and Digital Policy of the US State Department, and he says we want strong Europe because we want to have European partners strong, because then they are partners for us. We don't want to accumulate everything which is advanced technology in the US. This is not healthy for the market, this is not healthy for innovation, and this is not healthy for geopolitical balance, because if we hit that in the US, then there's nobody else to help us. So we want Europe to be strong. So last sentences to conclude that. I believe we need to develop our capacities and capabilities in Europe to increase our self-sufficiency. I don't use that word sovereignty too much, but self-sufficiency in Europe, to be a partner for our close friends and transatlantic allies, more and more equal partner. But it's not going to happen this year, next year, or the next 5 years. So it's a longer process. But in AI, in fact, I think that we have more chances when it comes to the conventional arms or the now traditional digital technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Michał, please share your thoughts.
Thank you very much. In contrast, I'm not diplomat. So sometimes for you, what I would say may sound a little harsh, but that looks from the perspective. What we are discussing today, AI, is not coming from nowhere. This is not the situation that Europe for the last 50 years, especially IT, was the leading continent and everyone was following us. If you think about the revolutions that we had in the past, starting from PCs, in the PCs era, then Europe was in par with the US, I would say. There was not a big difference. But then the internet came, then the mobile came, still we were good partners in this discussion.
Mobile were better.
In mobiles, for the moment, we were really better. And then, when the cloud revolution came, and I'm thinking about only these technologies that were really changing this, the landscape, not the marketing created technologies and people were saying this is the revolution. And now we are with AI. If someone would look when AI is where AI is now, and some people are saying, okay, we know AI for years. It was present in 70s, in 80s, in 90s. Today is the moment when everyone is started using this. That's the revolution, not because of the technology that was existing, but the ability of technology to be more common for everyone. And I'm thinking from the perspective of Microsoft, our investment in OpenAI was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. That was the moment. Why it could happen? Because if you think about ChatGPT 3.5, the one that was the skyrocketing news nearly 18 months ago. It was 275,000 of the GPUs connected in one system to train this model. Before you have this size, you need to have something that is 100,000. Before that, you need to have something that is 10,000, 1,000, etc., etc. It's time. It's what you said about the commercial planes. There are only 2 factories in the world that are building the large planes. the small planes, there are many factories around the world, but if in fact finally you are going to only two to buy the large planes. That's something that happened. Right now, when I'm thinking what's going on, there are like maybe two business information. First, you probably know that for NVIDIA, these hyperscaler cloud providers are the main customers. We are buying from NVIDIA these GPUs needed for AI heavyweight. We are more, as far as I remember, more than 50% of the revenue. Now, NVIDIA presented just a few weeks ago the new model, which is called Blackwell, which has I would not bother you with how many petaflops and what are the petaflops. It's 30 times stronger than the previous model. Guess who would use this? Who would start to use this new GPUs? And then I'll tell you that together with OpenAI, Microsoft and OpenAI, we decided to start the project Stargate. That will be, as a final, this, let's say, system will be ready for 2028. The cost, the budget for this project, $100 billion US. This is the moment. And of course, I would agree that there will be innovation coming from the small companies, but size does matter. And if you want to have this change, no matter if you think about all these new technologies, because the next, just as you mentioned, quantum computing is just knocking our doors. That's now I'm coming to Europe, where we are, how we can be the strong partner for the US companies, and I would say that have this self-sufficiency, as Mr. Ambassador said, or sovereignty, many people are saying. It's to be the partner for the like-minded countries, and this transatlantic cooperation, I think, is absolutely key to have another chance to be a partner in that. What I'm afraid, not as a person that is working for Microsoft, just like an European, protectionism is leading us nowhere, because that's the world will not wait for us. So that's the moment that we need to rethink our strategy toward technology, toward AI, and then try to be a good partner in this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, Marko.
Yeah, thanks. So many things were said already, but so this status of Europe, like in AI. So I'm doing, or my group is doing, this OECD AI Policy Observatory. So we have these monthly numbers on AI across the world, including Europe, right? Along like 12 dimensions. So I can tell you maybe a quick summary how AI stands, right? So some of the key dimensions, right, would be, well, research, academia, right? So this is one. Then job market is another one, which is extremely important, right? Fuels the rest, right? Then investments and, let's say, companies. There are more dimensions there, like patents and perception and maybe policies and so on, right? But quick summary. On academia, there are three main powers in the world, right? So US, Europe, and China, right? Europe and US are roughly aligned, so Europe together with UK. And Chinese overtook us in the last 2-3 years significantly in the production. Some people might say, okay, yeah, well, they produce a lot, but maybe their publications are not, or academic work is not that high quality. It's going up. So let's say if you go to AI conferences these days, you would see extremely good Chinese contributions, right? So, and this is, how the ecosystem works. First you see things in academia, and then down the line, like maybe 5 years after, you see the effects elsewhere. So this is academia. So here Europe kind of stands okay. Yeah? Then, let's say job market, right? We produce a lot of engineers, lots of smart people and so on, fine. But Europe is net losing the talent, right? Net losing the talent not necessarily just geographically, so many of the people just go to US, for instance, but we are losing talent also towards, well, US big tech having huge offices like Microsoft or Google. I learned like 5,000 Google people right in Poland. So we are losing our talent towards US big tech within Europe itself, right? And depending on the country, so some countries are actually losing also geographically talent, and some more, some less. Then where things start changing really bad for Europe is the investments, right? So in the field of investments, it's basically just US and China. Europe is so tiny that it's noticeable on these graphs, but it's really tiny. And believe me, we cover pretty much every single investment which happens in the world. Yeah, this is the weak point, and well, as Michał said before, this is an extremely important statement. So what surprised us in AI this last year is scale, right? So we were not counting that scale is so important, and this changed everything, right? So the ChatGPT, this November 22, right, 3.5, when it came out, this was known technique which every better student can do it. So it's not nothing special in the sense of conceptual algorithm and so on, but scale of data, especially scale of processing, which basically Europe doesn't have. Like what Microsoft has by itself, right, and landing to OpenAI, what AWS has, right? So Meta, Google, and there's nobody else pretty much. Yeah, this is way more than Europe has available, right? So, and we are simply not competitive on that side, right? So without these large infrastructures, which you can use for a few months, I forgot to say, this is not like you have it and you use it for a few hours, no, for a few months. And so this is what, we have big centers, right? But cannot use them or book them for a few months, right? So this is where we are failing in the modern generative AI. And then maybe the last stage would be policies, right, where we are pretty good, right, sort of, but this won't change this will change maybe on one front, but in terms of development, we live now on the infrastructures which are provided by Microsoft and some of the other big tech companies. So this is pretty much the status, I would say, in numbers. If you're interested more, go to OECD.ai. You have like 250 indicators measuring AI across many areas. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me and for the opportunity to exchange thoughts with such prominent speakers. In terms of where Europe stands in this race, I would agree that indeed we're lagging a little bit behind, but it's not without history, right? So, Mr. Ambassador already mentioned a lot of what led us to this situation, and especially in the semiconductor industry. And AI as a technology itself is very expensive. It's very expensive to develop, but it's very expensive to use. So it requires a lot of computing power, which demand for which rises virtually exponentially. Then you have need for vast amount of data, ability to process this data, and so on, and also to also having access to talent, which was already mentioned by Marko, but also the capability of markets to absorb this technology. So there are a lot of factors at play in that race. So we have already mentioned that Europe is lagging behind in the semiconductor industry, which is fueling the computing power, but also the platform economy. So Microsoft, Google have developed very large platforms which enable the use of AI, the development of AI. Europe doesn't have such capability currently. In terms of access to talent, we already mentioned that. We do have very prominent research institutes, but the traditional, how the research institutes are working in Europe is very different to the culture in the US, where there is a very close collaboration with the industry and the development of technology primarily for the industrial use, for applications, for military use, right? So there is a very strong interconnection of the whole ecosystem. Let's call it that, right? So in that sense, I would say there is a lot for Europe to catch up with. The capability that Europe still could build upon is having very diverse access to data, which is very different to the data that is available in any other geographical region. So on the one hand, we can say that it's a legacy. This diversity is a legacy, but it's also a very nice potential to build something unique, which US cannot address, right? Because this market is very, very different. So say Poland, say France, when we speak very different languages, and could develop very different applications.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the Atlantic Council for having me here. I'll try to be brief. I have 4 little points, and I hope I'm not too disruptive. I think speaking about Europe as a whole, in terms of the global AI race, helps us to paint the picture better than it is. If we looked at all the countries separately, obviously Germany and France are the leaders in Europe, but they are at the bottom of global top 10 in almost every index that exists. So especially in terms of Central European perspective, we're in Warsaw here, I'm Lithuanian. If we looked at the Central Eastern European countries and compare them to Western European countries, the leader among us is Estonia, which is, according to, for example, Tortoise index number 25 globally. So this is really painting a very gloomy picture, and although we do have a common goal for a single market, we do have a lot of common projects, we do have European Commission, now we have common regulation for AI. I think looking at separate countries also would be more practical in identifying the problems that we have. Speaking about the problems, AI Act, I hope is the start of a bigger discussion on the ICT or tech innovation in Europe, and what are the reasons that other regions in the world are much better in, not in research, Europe is great in research, at development, innovation, and subsequent commercialization. Our science institutions, be it Eastern Europe or Western Europe, can spend decades researching certain things, and they're great at that, but they're not exactly incentivized to work with the industry. There are, of course, exceptions. I don't want to generalize, but the general trend is as such. And speaking about the innovation potential and innovation measures, innovation promotion measures that the European Commission has prepared, packaged, and presented to us after adopting the AI Act, also we have to look at it very realistically. The amount that is presented as allocated towards AI innovation will have to be divided either among 27 member states, or will mostly be targeted by the biggest and the most known startups from mostly Western Europe. And the question whether, how many Central Eastern European champions will there be among European champions after the AI Act and all the ideas come into force, is a very good question that we should also ask ourselves. Future of Central Eastern Europe in the AI race. I already talked about the fact that we look extremely modest in the global AI race, if you will. But the political class, the policymakers, and the businesses in Central Eastern Europe, due to the fact that the markets are smaller, The startups, the companies that hail from our countries are usually globally and US oriented. They are less interested in participating in EU policy making, influencing it, etc., thinking that it does not really relate to them and it's not important to them. Let's wait 10, 20, 30 years until our countries become contributors, not the recipients of European support, and let's see how the market looks like and if the measures aimed towards enhancing European presence in the European tech market is in our favor or not. And yeah, I think those are all the points. We'll speak more about the innovations later.
Thank you very much. Really wonderful thoughts and insights from all speakers. And I just want to briefly summarize the key points you made regarding obstacles for Europe to be a dominant power in this AI race. And almost all of you mentioned a problem with size. So European companies are struggling to compete with the big non-European big giants in terms of developing AI systems. Another interesting point was about losing talent. That Europe is losing talent, and these people, the Europeans, prefer to work outside of Europe in AI field. Investments are quite expensive in AI field, and this is also a problem why Europe is not really doesn't really stand out in AI race. And also, one thing which Marko underlined and also others is that Europe is really good at crafting regulations for AI, but it's perhaps not really enough to catch up with these other great powers in this race. So now I would like to ask you individual questions, and previously we started from Pastor Chomicki, but now I would like to start from the middle, from Marko, and also a question related to global standards and regulations. So you have been working on it, and probably you already know inside out what are the key obstacles for Europe to, let's say, introduce these regulations on a larger scale and outside of Europe, and how Europe is trying to convince other countries in this race to adopt these standards and regulations. And what are the key challenges that Europe faces in promoting its values and regulations on international stage? And also why and how these technical standards and definitions are important for interoperability of AI regulations worldwide.
Yeah, maybe first to say, right, so usually in Europe we say, well, we have AI Act, which was the first, we always need to say, first comprehensive AI regulation. Chinese were faster, right, like 6 months, August last year. But just for generative AI, which was kind of relevant. So this is good to know, right? Good to know that Chinese really managed to do it like in a couple of years. But yeah, true. So Europe came up with this AI Act in a pretty hasty battles in December. I'm sure some of you were following why this was so important that Europe kind of reached some kind of consensus on AI Act, because if this wouldn't have happened in December, well, then Belgium took over the presidency and it would get prolonged, right? And it would come to election campaign, and then the parliament would be changed and commission and so on, and the next discussion would be in 25. So that's why it's so important. And everything would be, well, not everything, but many things would be just too late, right? So this is one important element. And I think now I was participating via our government and via OECD in shaping parts of this AI Act. First I would say a couple of things, right? So I think it's good consensus which is mature enough or relevant for this moment, right? Things may change in let's say in a year or two from now, but for this moment I think it was good consensus, right? So it's practical, It doesn't regulate technology, it regulates applications in a, I would say, fairly clear, consistent way. Many things, there are still many questions in the air, but general schema is kind of okay, right? Your question was also now how Europe could promote this mindset or this regulation to the rest of the world, right? So one way which I see, and I think it's kind of going well, is via international organizations which are participating in various ways in shaping AI Act, let's say through OECD, through Council of Europe, through NATO, through GPI, through UNESCO, right? So this would be maybe the key organizations which are providing these documents where Europe is not alone. Right? It's not alone, and let's say, for instance, in OECD I'm well involved, right? So everything functions there on consensus, and whatever OECD adopts, right? Also, let's say US would agree and so on, or co-shape, right, the document. So, for instance, definition of AI, which was adopted by OECD, was immediately taken over also by NIST, American Standards of Institute of Standards, by this executive order of Biden, includes the same text, and so on. So this is how these ideas promote, and all these countries were interested actually how all this, to observe the struggle of Europe to came up with some kind of lengthy document, 270 pages, right? Out of which maybe 20, 30 pages are really worth reading. And why this was also important, because these kind of ideas were kind of ready already in 22, mostly, right? And then this ChatGPT happened and, well, reset many of the thoughts. The generative AI, the foundational models, and all these other things which happened on the way, right? And I think, so I'm optimist, and I'm kind of happy, I would say, with this document at the moment, right? Also the way how it's structured, I don't know, some things are put in annexes, which are easier to change, so there's some flexibility in the whole thing and so on. So we shouldn't be too concerned. But true, yeah, implementation will happen in a year from now, and at that time we'll have different AI with new GPUs, which will be fast, right? And will generate, let's say, consequences which might not predict at the moment. Yeah, right? But yeah, everything learned the lesson, right? So the things need to be done fast.
Yes, I'm really glad to hear your positive assessment of AI Act, and also the fact that other countries are actually interested into what Europe has been doing on that front. Thank you for your notes. Next question I have for Anna, and this is about AI ethics, something that everyone is talking about. And as we delve into this world of AI, where technologies almost affect every single aspect of our life, ethical and transparent and accountable AI systems are crucial. Then we really want to have experts' opinion on what are the key ethical challenges that can be a negative consequence of AI development. So what are the concerns in this regard from your perspective? And also how basically researchers and people who develop AI can work on preventing some, let's say, the problems created in society in terms of, creating more biased systems, or creating more inequality as a result of AI development. So please tell us what keeps you up at night when it comes to AI ethics and dangers on that front.
Thank you for that very interesting question. I'm an economist, not an ethicist in principle, though many of the debates are very interrelated indeed. So ethics in artificial intelligence overall has been a very, very challenging topic. So we have moved from traditional models, which are very predictable, more deterministic. We're able to look inside the box, and suddenly we're challenged with non-deterministic models, which are producing very often very different answers every time you run them. And they are having millions, billions, trillions of parameters, and very difficult to determine how we arrived at the final answer. So in that sense, it poses a lot of challenge also in applications, especially for regulated industries. So take finance, banking sectors, for instance, which wants to use this technology. They see a lot of potential, but then you have the regulator at their back, and suddenly they don't know what to do. They are standing in front of a very, very difficult question: where we can use it, how we can use it, and how to do that safely to protect customers. And same for medical industry, you have patient rights, and you want to arrive at the best diagnosis, which is also correct. And with the AI systems, it's very difficult, as I mentioned, to have that traceability back and look into that into the black box. And along the way, you also have the development of those models, which are very data greedy, and having unbiased data for the training and very good quality data for the training is required to have a good quality output also on the other end. And as we know, on the example, the very example that possibly everyone has been playing with large language models. Well, this is not always given, right? So those models have been trained on vast amounts of data, which were not possible even to clean, to look at each and every example. There's a lot of bias which accumulated over the years of human production, let's call it that way. We as humans are biased in different points of views, which are expressed really on the internet, for instance. And since this data is called and collected and impossible to check diligently, this is the consequence later on in the output.
Yes, thank you. So the main, let's say, conclusion from your speech is that LLMs are trained on already biased data, and this is complicated to have non-biased systems because simply we don't have clean data free from bias, right?
Exactly, and there is a challenge on the output side as well. So there is a lot of hard work invested in developing guardrails that prevent and suppress certain types of output, but it's virtually impossible to guarantee 100% success. And there's a lot of, also related to the ethics dimension, cybersecurity issues of those applications where this can be jailbreaked, and there is no guarantee to protect them for, and also models can be stolen, and lots of related concerns around that.
Yes, thank you. And we already talked about regulations. Now we talked about ethics, and I think it's time to talk about the room for innovation. Eglė, if you could tell us, we are at the crossroad where we try to ensure that AI systems are ethical, but at the same time, we really want these systems to be innovative as well. Do you see it as a balancing act here? Do you think that regulations and these ethical considerations can in some ways create an obstacle for people who develop AIs to innovate, or this is non-existent problem? So what's your thoughts on this? And also, you spoke about Eastern European perspective, and also the fact that maybe there is still some division between Western and Eastern Europe on that front as well. But what are your thoughts in terms of how European countries can better cooperate to develop robust AI systems?
Thank you so much. When researching global AI race, I noticed a correlation. I don't claim it to be causation, but the best countries, the countries that are the best in AI, are usually common law countries. U.S., Singapore, common law countries are countries influenced by common law heavily. US, Singapore, Israel, South Korea to some extent, etc., UK, obviously. So when thinking about this and when thinking about the whole world, I see 4 groups of countries. The first group is the one that the European Union belongs. Codified law, top-down laws, clear framework that does not really keep up with the technological development or the entrepreneurial mind. That's why we need annexes in AI Act, because even the regulators themselves admit that the act may be outdated in some years, and there will be needed some changes that are very hard to reach politically. The second group is, as I spoke before, common law countries, US, Israel, South Korea to some extent, Singapore. Those are countries that have the benefit of precedent, and they can refrain from very specific frameworks and use the existing precedents like court rulings and so on without really creating this framework for companies without really going deep into the technology, without going deep into discussing the issues with the companies. There's a third group, which I would call really a sort of purpose-driven countries. It's a nice name, but it's not necessary. The goals are not necessarily that nice. Those are the type of countries that are using the technology and are crafting their specific regulations to further their own national and economic goals. Usually these countries have the luxury of not having democracy, and don't quote me on that, but obviously when you have a democratic setup, as we do in the European Union, it's very hard to stay with the idea that you had initially, having all those influence groups, political views, and so on. So these countries really have a very clear-cut vision for their countries, be it their businesses or political goals, and they're using it to further their own national goals. I won't name any countries, but you might understand what could be the examples. And the fourth type is undecided, the observers who are watching what's happening either in the European Union or elsewhere, and they're influenced either by the political class or specific companies from the eastern or the western part of the Pacific Ocean, let's put it that way. So looking at these law types and these regulatory approaches, we can understand and self-reflect as Europeans that we're subjected to a very rigid, specific frameworks, top-down laws and regulations that are also cascading into our lives, let's put it that way. Therefore, the problems of entrepreneurial activity, the problems of scientific community not being truly motivated to commercialize and so on and so forth. I think it's a cultural problem as well, which has to be addressed in one way or another. Talent is important. Central Eastern European countries have the biggest number of ICT talent produced in our universities. Despite that, we have the biggest brain drain, and we have the lack of ICT specialists in our countries. The same with Europe. If we have companies that scale to a certain extent, at some point they consider moving to the West, to the US or somewhere else where the opportunities for them to scale even further are and cooperate with other businesses and academia are much better. The third issue, money, we've already talked about the governmental support. It's not enough. What we have in Europe, it's not enough. The European Commission talking about AI innovation support is also talking about, for example, the money from Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is being used for a myriad of projects, and it's not necessarily AI specific. So answering your question, the interplay between promoting innovation and regulation and ensuring the regulation is adhering to the principles and rights we want to have in Europe, it's a very hard question, but I think we have to learn a lot from countries that are known as common law countries and see how our governments can cooperate with businesses without really moving towards very specific regulations until we're sure that we are at the right moment and at the right time for this type of regulation. And when it comes to cooperation, it's a tough question. We have, as Central Eastern Europeans, we have to be very honest about our place in Europe at the moment, looking at various indices. Despite the fact that we have great startups where we have a great 20+ year story of political and economic transformation, we still lag behind the EU average in most areas, be it infrastructure, AI uptake, cloud uptake, digital skills, and so on and so forth. So Central Eastern Europeans, the political class acknowledges the fact that we still have to work a lot, and maybe we don't deserve to be part of a bigger conversation because we're not ready. Second, our bureaucracies are much smaller and are not able to keep up with the Brussels pace, so to say. It's a human problem, and we are incapable of being equal partners in this dialogue. This has to change. We have to start thinking about a long-term perspective, and that our inactivity or certain timidness might become a big problem in 10 to 20 years when we become even richer and better countries.
Thank you very much, and indeed, achieving equality is super important, but I think we are on a right path to do that, especially that you mentioned that there is a really big talent in ICT in the region, in Eastern Europe, and this is probably one of the opportunities, let's say, for this region to play on equal footing with the Western European countries. But then I would like to ask next question to Michał regarding the role of private sector to, let's say, even in terms of achieving this equality, you know, and in general, when we are thinking about big tech companies, society and citizens are always primarily concerned about the contribution that these big companies can have to economic growth, including people in Europe. Probably they are expecting that big companies will leverage AI and harness the benefits, which would, at the end of the day, create more welfare and more jobs. And people are just worried that they may lose jobs, but actually it's probably also a job for big companies to explain to their employees or others that no, actually you shouldn't really worry about that, and we are working for creating this job instead of taking away from you, right? So, and also how you think that European businesses should approach in terms in investments in AI systems, and also in order to ensure a sustainable economic growth. And also what you think about current European regulations. We have been discussing this a lot, but also it's important to know from Microsoft perspective or from private sector perspective how you see and if they are helping you or creating obstacles for you.
Do we have another hour? Okay. There are so many questions in this one question, so let me go one after one. I go backwards, and we were discussing AI Act and the other digital regulations that we have these days. And once again, we need to look a little bit back and find out what's going on in this digital regulation. If it would be the only AI act on the table, wow, everyone would say that's great. But at the very same time, we have NIS2, DORA, DGA, DSA, DMA, CER Directive, CRA, etc., etc. We have really dozens of acts that are interrelated. They are impacting the digital sphere, and they are impacting our lives. Very often, let's say like everyone probably heard about GDPR, right? We have it nearly 6 years right now. There is Data Act coming. GDPR is about the personal data protection. Data Act is about non-personal data protection. Looks really interesting as a one system. No, even vocabulary is different. So you need to have it. If you think about GDPR is around 70 pages. AI Act will be more than 200 pages. Pavel, correct me if I'm wrong, but it will.
270.
Yeah, 270. Thank you, Marko. And all the others, they are coming in the very same time, and they are coming and they are getting bigger and bigger, fatter and fatter. That definitely will be the kind of the problem how to manage this. One more thing that we are sometimes so blinding ourselves that okay, with example of GDPR, and everyone was following Europe. Everyone started talking about the personal data protection, and many of the regulations around the world were copying GDPR. Okay, GDPR is in place since 2018. It was published 2016. It was produced in the beginning of the previous decade, based on completely different Europe, based on completely different level of technology. That was the moment when Europe still was, just like what Mr. Ambassador said, with mobile we were ahead of this. That was why the whole world was following Europe. This is not the case today. We were discussing this. Okay, so I have a lot of concern because I was raised in this industry in the moment, but this was non-regulated industry. These days it's becoming very heavily regulated industry. And I really don't know how it will work, what will be the outcome of this. Let's see, because it's done, it's fixed, we have it, we have to live with that. Okay, now back to the role of the business, role of these large companies. When you mentioned after the first part of our discussion, what are the key points that we made? You said about the scale and investment that are necessary for that. You said about the talent loss. Eglė, thanks for raising this point, because sometimes we are thinking about the brain drain in a very old way. We're thinking this is emigration. No, it's not. You mentioned already this, the people that are working for the foreign companies or the local companies that are working for the foreign markets. I can see this here in Poland when we have many partners that are totally not interested in the Polish local market. They are interested to sell in the US, they are interested to sell in Gulf area, they are interested to sell in EU, not in Poland. And the answer is very simple, we don't have customers here. It's very simple. And they are making these foreign companies stronger to compete with our local Polish companies. That's the and this is only the three ways how we are losing talents in sense of maybe not the brain drain, but that's what's happening. The third point was the transfer from academia to applied science to the business. I think that's a really big problem. So how we can cope with this, how we can tackle these problems, and what could be the role of these large companies? Okay, I'm from business, so I'm a simple man, and there are only the three strategies in business: get big, get niche, or get out. So if we have a problem to get big today, maybe tomorrow it will be different. And we don't want to get out, so we need to focus on something that is niche. once again. And we could be very, very good at that. Looking from the point of view of Poland, looking from the pure point of view of each and every country that we have, but also as a European Union. We could have a lot of niches and we could make a very big progress on them. The other part, and that's, sir?
I think it's working. I think it's working.
Yeah, it's working. Oh, thank you. Major, I didn't know that you are listening. The other part is the partnership. What we have made this calculation at Microsoft. Each and every single dollar that that is spent on Microsoft in Europe, I think it was for Europe, it makes $8 that is created by our partners. Because we are a platform. So we are just democratizing the technology. Today it's AI, maybe tomorrow it will be quantum, maybe the very next day it will be something else. We are democratizing, we are making it available for the customers and for our partners. Giving you two examples. Sorry, it looks like the advertisement block, right? Okay, the first part of this advertisement block. 2 days ago, we have made the conference here in Warsaw about the new ISO 42001. This is the first standard related to AI systems management. And there is the first company that is already certified for that, from Poland. The headquarters, because of the access to investment, is Austin, Texas. Of course, all the people are working here, but the headquarters is Austin, Texas. That's the one thing. The other part, you probably heard about this shops that there's no people inside, so you are going, you are taking, you are not paying, you are going outside, and that's it. Do you know that Żabka in Poland is probably the largest in the world system of such shops? Using AI, using all those things, and that's something where we can go. We need this type of people. So how the strategy of the governments can be done? What type of the partnerships with people like us can be done? So we have just announced that we are spending in investment billions in Spain, in UK, in Germany, in Japan. I would love to see the same announcement about Poland. I would love to see that. But what that means, what could be the strategy of the state in such situation? Where is this partnership, public-private partnership, in achieving this new goals and what is achievable? Okay, so I don't think that we can go take the strategy of get out, and if we cannot beat them, join them. That's the old sentence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have 5 minutes left before we open questions, the floor to the audience. And Ambassador, I would like to ask you the final question about national security challenges posed by AI. And more specifically, 2024 is a year of elections, where we reach more than 2 billion people globally will be voting, including in the European continent, right? And we see that revisionist powers like Russia or Iran are increasingly using AI systems to, let's say, pose threats to our democracies and also election integrity. I just want to know your thoughts how these countries, external hostile actors, can leverage AI to, and in what ways they can leverage AI to undermine election process in Western democracies, and what are the safeguards that Western countries have in place to prevent this kind of influence and interference using AI?
We'll try to use 1 minute to answer this question, but 4 other minutes to share my observations from this discussion, if you allow me. It's of course, this information has become one of the major tools of influencing the other nations and providing for your interest in the other states, specifically from Russia. But also other countries that you mentioned. And we've been witnessing the eruption of this exploitation of these tools since the last current phase of the Russian aggression on Ukraine started in February 22. In the first week of this new phase of the war, we have identified in Poland about 1,600 false narratives that Russia has been deploying to mess with the relation between Poland, Ukraine, Poland, US, Polish people and Ukrainians, etc. But today we can observe the acceleration of this deployment of this information tools by adopting the generative AI. And of course, generative AI has been used in many examples. There in the US, in Bangladesh, even in different places when the generative AI has been used to manipulate the political opinion, the voters, the electoral processes. The British government has published recently a statement about the influence of AI on the disinformation campaigns in the electoral processes. As you mentioned, this year is the year of elections. I think we've been doing pretty well in Poland when it comes to the parliamentary elections we had in October and the very recent local elections when it comes to the protection from cyber attack and disinformation attacks, but we expect more challenges in the European parliamentary elections coming soon. It is a race. It's a race. And I mentioned it in the context of the cybersecurity. It was a race. How we use AI between the bad guys and the good guys, simply, right? And I will make a comment on that in the moment. But I want to share some observations about the challenges the AI poses to the governments. And I remember my major field of activity is actually cybersecurity, the new technologies, and I have been pushed on me because it is happening, right? But I started from focusing on cybersecurity in more traditional sense. And I remember in October 22, not that long ago, but it seems like an ancient era from the point of view of AI development. We had a meeting of the EU cyber ambassadors and distinguished scholars in Florence, one of them sitting in this room. And during that meeting, we were discussing the challenges we're facing in cybersecurity, how to defeat the bad guys, how to protect us from the bad guys. And then I made a comment that, it's all peanuts what we're discussing here, because with the development of AI, when AI is applied to cyber attacks and cyber malicious activities, this is the kindergarten that we are talking about. And then some of my colleagues were saying, oh, no, it's not going to happen anytime soon and everything, yeah? I said, I hope you are right, because I hope to retire before it happens. I am an ancient person, and I look even older than I am, but I'm still not yet in the retirement age, so I don't have this privilege of looking at from outside to what is happening. So we have to deal with it now, right? And what I mean here, I talked to my French colleague, the cyber digital ambassador of France, André, and he showed me a diagram that the French Foreign Ministry made about the digital process, not just AI, which are influencing the safety and security. And I counted 600 different initiatives and processes they should look at. And at the beginning of this year, I made an assessment of how many different initiatives and processes related to the AI we should follow in the world. Around 80. Those which are influencing the situation of our safety and security. 80. We can't follow 80. My team is not big enough, to be honest, right? So who can follow? It creates a feeling of helplessness and a little bit of a chaos in what's going on, eruptive changes. But at the same time, our job as the government is to provide for the safety and security of our societies. And what we can do here is to provide regulations mostly, right? We thought EU is the source of regulations. The major power of governments to write regulations to limit the collateral damage of the challenges to the citizens of the country, citizens of Europe, or the citizens of the world. Depends on the level we're talking. So how we can create an NI regulatory framework where we can provide for the transparency, for accountability, for responsibility, and also ethical behavior of AI-related systems. This is the challenge. It's extremely, extremely difficult, right? And there is, I want to give an example of a few dimensions of the challenges. One is the tension or the balance that we should provide between regulation and innovation. We cannot kill innovation by over-regulating it. The private sector, of course, will not very deeply and strongly to what I say, but it's true. I mean, it's true, right? We must not over-regulate, not to kill the innovation. But we need to provide safety versus the profit that the companies. Companies are not charity organizations, right? They run for the profit. The profit is there. Within the application of AI to their jobs, the profit will be multiplied. So how to restrain the companies from being too greedy to use the AI in not responsible way to provide for our safety and security is the balance that about AI mostly. And we're talking to Microsoft, we're talking to Google, we're talking to Meta, we're talking to Apple, and so on and so on. And those small little companies like OpenAI people. And it was very interesting because we could see in the smaller companies we're talking to, biotech companies or quantum companies, the smaller they were, the more honest about, we are discovering the new world, it's fascinating. It will be so good for the people. And we were saying, looking at them like, it's bringing some danger to this world. Do you understand that, right? So that was the dialogue. And medium-sized companies, small startups like OpenAI, probably there were 500 people there, they say, yeah, we understand there are some concerns. We're trying to do something, but you have to help us and come up with regulations. They were saying that. The big tech, like my colleagues here and the others, I don't name them which one, they were all like pre-recorded message for us. We understand the complexity of the problem. We are seriously taking these problems and challenges into our work on a daily basis. We provide resources to tackle that. We'll be working with you. But if you try to knock and scratch to get what actually are you doing to provide for the safety, security, ethical use of the AI, we are working on that. So it's
I can speak for it.
yeah, no, I'm saying what I'm saying here is I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm saying there is a very thin line how to strike the balance between the needs of regulation, the needs of innovation, the needs for the profit, the needs for the safety, security, privacy, etc. to be protected. And there is two other dimensions of this that I wanted to mention. There's of course this geopolitical race that we started, right? So we have countries which are working with their companies and are racing for the political reasons. And you have US, you have China, you have Russia, luckily not very important player in this game so far, but they're training the people widely. And then you have Europe, and we have, that's one dimension of this, all dilemmas that we're discussing. Yet another dimension is the very simple distinction between good guys and the bad guys. And the bad guys can be governments, the bad guys can be just criminals, right? How we can fight with them. I think I've seen a general deputy commander of the Polish Cyber Defense Forces coming into the room somewhere. Maybe he's over there, you know? And he may verify my words, but I'm of the belief that when it comes to application of AI to cyber defense, we are a little bit ahead of the AI being applied by our adversaries in NCS. Why? Because us, like-minded, are those countries who have a technological advantage. US, Europe, etc. put together, we still have advantage over our major adversaries like Russia today. right? So far, will continue. And the last, I think, interesting element, I'm sorry for keeping you late and long, but it's interesting. It has been said at the beginning, one of our ladies, I think Madam Minister mentioned it, that after all, it depends, AI is taking from us, it's learning on us. And so the AI has this feature that it mirrors our culture. The AI technology mirrors our culture, our mode of thinking, our hierarchy of values, etc. So it depends from whom AI is learning, will have this AI then ruling the world in which we may be allowed to live or not. So if the AI will learn from the good guys, it will be relatively okay world, right? Not perfect, nobody's perfect. But if the AI learns from the bad guys more than from the good guys, then we have a problem, right? And AI is like a man. And my last point is an anecdote. It is about 1 year ago, maybe February last year, the ChatGPT became publicly very available. People were crazy and feeding the data to train the ChatGPT for free. And we made a little test with my neighbor in the foreign ministry, sitting next door, Mr. Robert Kupiecki. He's currently Undersecretary of State, Deputy Foreign Minister, my boss. But this time he was just nobody sitting there, professor of the Warsaw University, sitting in the Department of the Security Policy who involves work. And we asked ChatGPT, who is Robert Kupiecki? And the ChatGPT didn't know. Of course, ChatGPT said, oh, we only have data until 2020. Anything newer is not, we don't have access. And Mr. Kupiecki used to be, among other jobs, he was our ambassador to Washington, he was our deputy ambassador to NATO, he was deputy minister of defense, etc. So if you ask Google, he would know something about Robert Kupiecki, but when you ask ChatGPT, nobody. So how it works, we ask him second time, no, we don't know. Third time, he started to think, so to say. After fourth time we asked who's Robert Kupiecki, he said, well, he's a retired Polish general, which he's not. And so eventually he got some information that this Kupiecki gentleman was working in some security-related issues. So if it's security or defense, he must have been a general. But he's not active, so because he was on a sidetrack in the last previous 8 years, so he must be retired. So he must have been a retired general. And then he generated a link to the bibliography, to the works by retired General Kupiecki that did not exist. There was a blue link. To click it and you would open it, did not exist. I talked to the creators and the board of the OpenAI about it. And they said, yeah, we have a problem. Because I said, you know, this is when it is not intentional disinformation campaigns. This is not intentional use of AI to fight the enemies. But if the kids will learn from your chat about who's Robert Kupiecki, they will have the completely false information, and then we'll have a society grown, made out of people who are completely learned, who has learned and acting on completely false knowledge. Not because somebody manipulated them, some adversaries from the East or from China, but because your algorithms were providing false narrative, because they are like humans. They don't like to be asked 3 times and not to admit, I don't know. It's like us. If you ask somebody 3 times about something, the people don't like to say, I don't know, I don't know. So after 3rd or 4th time, especially diplomats, we started to make up something, right? Because we cannot admit we don't know something. So it's one of the dangers which is missed in the discussions sometimes.
Yes, thank you. And definitely laziness and inaccuracy of ChatGPT and other AI systems is a challenge, but I think that they will get better with that. So, Aaron, I have to ask a question. We run out of time, but I still want to give a chance, so we can still 5 minutes for coffee break, I guess. Thank you once again for wonderful points and also reflections. And now probably we have time for 2 or 3 short questions from the audience. Yes, lady over there, gentleman over there. Let's start from the lady in the left corner.
I'm glad to speak up. I'm not sure if
Yeah, I think you should get microphone.
Thank you so much. My name is Marko. I'm one of the speakers on the following panel. I'm a humble researcher from the University of Lodz. I like the discussion about the niche we might be seeking. I appreciate the discussion about the ethics, the guardrails. It's a really fascinating panel, so thank you very much for sharing all of those insights. I am not going to phrase this comment as a question, it's an actual question. One theme that I have not heard mentioned yet in this dialogue, I apologize for being blunt, are human rights. So Europe argues for being the ultra-regulator. We have the regulatory power to impose human rights onto AI. That's the whole point of the AI Act. Not ethics, but actual law that we have developed. It's wonderful to speak about human rights in the Atlantic Council because we've struggled to bridge the transatlantic divide with GDPR, for example. And that was a great success. We managed to do that, regardless of how our friends on the other side of the Atlantic might feel about it. So I'm curious if you might consider the human-centric approach to AI that Europe has taken in the AI Act and the complementary regulations as our power, as that niche. Because I think the sentiment here is that it's rather curtailing innovation, it's stalling innovation. If you want to innovate in AI, don't come to Europe, right? That seems to be the business approach. But I'm curious if we could use it as an actual niche and say if you want safe AI, you might want to innovate according to European law, particularly the human-centric approach. Something I haven't heard is algorithmic bias, right? And there's a lot of work done in the EU on preventing algorithmic bias. We have a body of law and work on non-discrimination. Could we use it to turn this challenge into an advantage? Thank you. I'm trying to be as brief as I can. Thank you.
Would you like to ask this question to a specific speaker?
I'm looking at Dr. Pastwa there because I think she was emphasizing the role of ethics, guardrails, but I'm glad to hear from any of the panelists. Thank you.
Oh, so indeed, let me start and pass the microphone to anyone else who feels sharing their thoughts as well. So indeed, this is a very important aspect of the European competitiveness. So in that sense, when I was preparing those, I was also stumbling upon this thought that, in essence, what Europe is trying to also build upon is offering better products, safer products, not only products, which could be offering a lot of shortcuts probably here as well. So in that sense, I agree. This is one of the strengths that we are setting apart from other countries, from China, which is focusing on products which in Europe, in the EU AI Act, we explicitly forbid, right? So investing in mass surveillance for military, for policing uses as well, and also having access to this type of explainability, offering customers a way to challenge also the output of the AI models used for decision making, to set a clear framework of not only using AI, producing AI, but also interacting with AI as a customer in that sense.
Thank you. Normally I would ask other speakers to chime in, but now we really don't have time, and we have a second question that I also want to accept, so if you could pass the microphone.
My question will relate also to the legal problems. Well, let me just raise one simple issue. The problem of responsibility for war crimes if the war crime is committed by a system which has the decision power based on AI. How to handle it?
Anyone willing to respond to this question? Yes.
Dr. Kulesza.
I will do that in the following panel. I'm glad to do that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so not sure if I'm the right person, right? But this accountability, it's a big issue, right? When regulating AI, because the chain of actors, right? Roles from developers up to the product and deployers and users, it's long, right? I mean, yeah, easier problems would be in autonomous driving than war crimes, right? War crimes, but we are experiencing now this, I think for the first time on a larger scale with autonomous weapons. So I don't have answer, but responsibility, I think, at least in this foreseeable time, I think nobody will be responsible until somebody will be or lose, right? Most likely, this is below the regular discussion in the hierarchy of importance in the problem. This is my personal opinion.
Thank you. And I think with that we should conclude this session. I really hope that this was informative for our audience, and at least for me it was super, let's say, informative, and received answers on many questions I had. I'm really grateful for your points and your thoughts, and then looking forward to kick off the next session on cybersecurity. And let's together applause our speakers.
Please grab some coffee, and our next panel will start in 30 minutes.
It's late on a Friday, and we don't want to keep you from whatever you want to do later, wine spritzer or a nice nap. But I think you'll find the subject that we're going to talk about here for the next hour important and very timely, because we want to talk about cybersecurity and public-private partnership, but specifically lessons from Ukraine and the intersection of public-private partnerships, innovation, emerging and disruptive technologies, and national security is not an abstract discussion today. It is here and it is now. And with our great panelists, we're going to discuss about hopefully how we talk about enhancing our cooperation, strengthening European security, building more resistance in cyber and digital domains. And again, think about what's been happening in Ukraine, how they've had to adapt, and what lessons we can take from that, so that we not only deal with the short term, but we also plan with the lessons of the real world in mind. And I just returned this morning from the 3C Summit in Vilnius, and I heard from 3 different people yesterday. Seems like a long time ago, but it was only yesterday. 3 different people in different ways said Ukraine is now the most digitally agile country in the world. And you know, they are, of course, doing that by necessity, but it also, I think, has lessons for us about how we do things when we face pressing needs. Do we have 24 months to plan and run a shutdown? That by that time, the threat has evolved so far that what we were asking for is now no longer relevant. So I think there's a lot to think about. And adversity does breed innovation and change. But I think policymakers, cyber defenders, our businesses, and so we look forward at the bottom line going forward, how do we participate in what I hope will be a more enhanced cooperative environment, because I think the pace of threat evolution, the pace of disruption evolution is not going to slow down anytime in the near future. So with that, I would like to welcome our guests. We have Brigadier General Mariusz Milewski, Deputy Commander of the Cyber Command of the Polish Armed Forces. His Excellency Tadeusz, Estonia's Ambassador at Large for Cyber Diplomacy. Who would have imagined some years ago that we would have ambassadors for cyber diplomacy? I wasn't that imaginative, but I'm sure some people were thinking about it and understood. Dr. Joanna Kulesza, she's an assistant professor of international law and the director of the WUSH Cyber Hub. Maciej Waska, he's defense and security lead at Palantir Technologies. And Marcin Krasucki with Google's government affairs and public policy team. So General, if I might start with you. Together with General Melinda, you're leading one of Poland's newest security and armed forces formations. And could you share perhaps what are some of the initial key lessons that Cyber Command is taking from the ongoing war in Ukraine?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the introduction and of course the invite. Of course, it's a very difficult question because a lot of the ideas and the elements that we consider, that we study from the Ukrainian conflict are very classified. But the major approach that you can see on the battlefield is the approach towards the dual-use technologies used. The second, I would say, is that based on the technologies that you can use as a military, or we can use as a military, we should reorientate our approach towards the civilian technologies and their availability on the battlefield. And the third one, I guess, is the resilience taken from the AI-based, we can say AI-based autonomous systems. So a lot of new technologies that have been introduced in Ukraine, they rely strictly on software-defined, you can say software-defined everything. It means as well, and also software-defined defense. And we say this is an idea of having elements of software implemented in hardware, and they have been developing those systems since 2014. A lot of great things and great applications that have been developed in Ukraine are being used by the warfighters. Just imagine that there are articles saying that each and every soldier on the battlefield is carrying within his smartphones, which provide the functionality for them to survive on the battlefield, which means that the software is guarding the soldiers on the battlefield. Of course, they use it very, very wisely in terms of the electromagnetic spectrum. So it's a very known fact that they use the cybersecurity, the electromagnetic spectrum, and they camouflage themselves within the electromagnetic spectrum. So those are the three key elements. When we go into the cyber defense, we say that, and I checked the numbers. So we received the data from the cyber attacks from Ukraine that 58% of them were aimed at degradation of the networks and the services. 21% of them have been connected with disruption, and 26% of them espionage. So it will put into the spectrum of our understanding what is the adversary looking for within the systems and the technologies that they use for them to, let's say, disrupt, reorientate the Ukrainian military and the citizens and the systems. And the last thing I think that we should consider is that the Ukrainian military and of course the companies from IT market, they have been integrating their services, and they have developed their own sovereign technologies for them to use on the battlefield, which means that of course the big techs, they have helped in the first stage of the conflict, but the majority of the systems that have been developed for them to use, they have done by their soldiers, by their officers and their companies, and we can learn from them a lot because the sovereignty of the technologies, this is the resilience within their systems at the moment. So a lot of experiences should be gathered and taken from their way of working with the technology and securing the systems. And we say that when we train a lot of warfighters in Europe to prepare them for war in Ukraine. Perhaps the exchange of experiences should be a way for us to prepare ourselves for the future conflicts based on the experiences taken from Ukraine.
Well, thank you, General. Yes, I think that there's lessons being learned every day. I guess part of it is being able to take notes fast enough to and then figure out how to actually implement those.
Hardened systems.
So, if I could turn to you, Ambassador Stefan. We were discussing earlier about how it's hard to talk about the cyber and digital space as a standalone, since it's so integrated into everything that we do today in business and public service. But from your view, working in digital diplomacy, how has that environment changed over the last several years after the Russian invasion? Is the discussion evolving, or are we still have some old school thinking?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'll get right to the point. I think that the overall environment is changing radically. We're not talking much about it yet, but I guess we will talk about it more and more. And the way how it has changed, well, I've also read quite many different books about cyber warfare and what will happen in the future. And do we see cyber Armageddon, cyber 9/11? No. I think that one of the biggest lessons that we really need to take with us from Russia's war against Ukraine is that the theory of cyber being integrated into conventional warfare is now a practice. And at the same time, cyber isn't just a tool, it's an enabler. It's not a goal in itself. Because rockets hitting maternity hospital have much bigger physical and psychological impact than taking down some abstract network. So this is one of these key lessons at least for us. The question now is, how well are we then prepared in terms of integrating cyber tools into our defense, and also to be prepared for the offensive. Estonia has been kind of part of Ukraine's digitalization already for a long time. We had first projects in Ukraine already in 2012. In 2019, President Zelensky came to Estonia, saw what we had, and said, I also want to have something similar. What's the lesson here? The lesson is that Ukrainians were smart enough and really wise to take the top-notch solutions from 2019 and afterwards. If we talk about DI, then already then they saw that it's more reasonable to go with the state services to where people are, to the mobile phone. I mean, we are, in Estonia, we are developing our app right now. So we were kind of stuck in our legacy, but Ukrainians took that. But the big question here is the long-term relationships. I think this is something that Poland also used really well, and we also did. That when the war broke out now 2 years ago, then Ukrainians already knew us for a long time. Also the cyber people knew us, and they turned also to us asking for help. And we knew them. So, I mean, our project started in 2012, before Maidan. So the situation was already so different. And the big kind of question here is also with in dealing with other countries, how should everyday politics define your partnership with certain country? Should you invest into long-term partnership or not? In Ukraine's case, it has really worked out.
Well, I think that you're right. The long-term relationships, when so many millions of people came across the border, the fact that there had already been millions of Ukrainians working here, there wasn't that shock. There was relationship, there was acceptance, and I think that is an example of if you know people, you tend to trust them a little more, and then they're better able to help you or you help them. Dr. Kulesza, we are a collection of democratic countries committed to rule of law and international standards, but we're also in an incredibly rapidly changing time. So if I leave the AI side of it out, do you think that we're able to meet the challenge from a legal point of view to allow our governments, to allow our security services, to allow our citizenry to live in this highly adaptive new world? Or do we need to figure out a new way to develop legal frameworks to not only protect our businesses, but protect our citizens and the way our countries function?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Thank you so much. Now, doing what I do, I only have one option to say, yes, of course, international law helps us solve these challenges. But it also means that both international law and national regulations need to adapt. Now, if you were to ask me for the legal framework for addressing the current challenge in Ukraine, but any kind of cybersecurity challenge that tackles international actors, I would go back to the UN in 2015 confirming international law applies offline and it applies online as well, the same way. We're just trying to figure out what it means. And Ukraine put that assumption to the test, so we needed to redefine the discussion around the cyber warfare threshold hasn't been crossed. No one has really said that the cyber component meant we have crossed that threshold. We crossed it on the ground, and the cyber component is a part of it. If you were to ask me which areas of the application of international law have been challenged the most, I would probably point to the state responsibility for non-state actors. You would see both private companies supporting Ukraine with expertise, with software. Neither party of that conflict mentioned that, for example, Microsoft providing software, providing expertise, takes part in the war themselves. We haven't been there yet, and no one was bold enough to say just because you're sending software, just because you're sending experts, just because you're sending civil society representatives, you're taking part in the warfare itself. This discussion didn't really happen in Poland that much. We just knew we had to do what we have to do to help our Ukrainian friends, because the consequences otherwise would have been tragic. But I know that this is a very in-depth discussion that the German Foreign Ministry had, the Ministry of Defense had. How far can we help Ukrainians, both militarily, but that's relatively well assessed in international practice, but also with regards to the public-private partnership. How much aid can we support? On the other hand, we've struggled with attributing state responsibility to non-state actors in Crimea since the very first, if you will, invasion. The little green men here in Poland, quite popular, have been a challenge to attribute responsibility to Russia. We've seen it in Estonia, right? So the Estonian attacks of 2007 were conducted by an NGO, NASI, right? So the supportive, Kremlin-supportive organization, young people, we couldn't attribute that responsibility to Russia. If you look at Ukraine right now, there's the IT army of Ukraine, which is not part of the army itself. I could literally install software on my device and help Ukrainians. How do you qualify that from the national cybercrime perspective? Am I a mere cyber criminal conducting a DDoS attack onto Kremlin resources? Or am I a militant? Where do we draw that line? It's never been easy to answer, but I believe that Ukraine put a lens onto that problem that we have to address. There seems to be a very cautious response from both sides. Russians could raise it. They haven't. They are well aware of that argument that we've been making. My particular area of focus is due diligence. How do you prevent these things from happening? No one raised it yet. So I'm going to say, of course, international law is a toolbox for cyber diplomats. We'll probably come back to the cyber diplomacy debate in this panel as well. It's a tool that we give cyber diplomats to ensure peace and security. It's just that the challenge to use it effectively was increased, became more difficult for us to address with the tools that we have. But we do have the toolbox. I'm going to stick to that answer. Thank you.
Well, I think not only cyber diplomacy, but also I think we'll also come back to the idea of the cyber militia, and how that works and how that's utilized, how official it is, unofficial it is, etc. But thinking about the role of non-state actors, Google's been active from the very beginning in support for Ukraine, tools and technologies. And so, what can our businesses and our government counterparts do, to continue to improve resiliency, to figure out how to deter and defeat cyber aggression? Because I occasionally like to tell people, whether it's a state entity or a private company, the only way we're going to be effective in this is figuring out how we work together better and use the best tools available.
Thank you, Tony, for the question, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for
Could you
inviting
speak
me.
up a bit?
I think it doesn't work.
I broke it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it does.
No,
Of course, okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me. So, first of all, I'd like to begin with a little pushback to Mr. Ambassador, because I think that the big techs, as you called us, we did not help only at the beginning, but I think we are still helping, and we are still quite crucial in Ukrainian defense. Just to give you examples, we have been helping out in protecting cyber domain with our Mendiant leading cybersecurity company. More than 50,000 Ukrainian public civil servants are working on Google Workspace, which is safe, secure, and thanks to that, the Ukrainian administration can work. And thirdly, what is crucial in the wartime situation is societal resilience. So the access to independent information, and so because of that, we thought since the beginning that we would need to protect information space of Ukrainians. And since then, we have been hosting more than 200 news sites and web pages that are providing information to Ukrainians. Whether the Russians declare this as an act of war, I think not yet, but this does not stop them from bankrupting our company in Russia. Maybe I'll reveal as a little secret, but like when the war started, our country director was literally blackmailed, and she was offered 24 hours to basically accommodate the Russian demands, because if not, she would be arrested. So we helped her, the company helped her out to escape Russia. But you can imagine the immense toll it took on her personally and her family, because she was natively Russian and now she's residing in Dubai. Afterwards, we evacuated all our employees from Russia, and in return, the Russian authorities bankrupted our company there. But nevertheless, we are still operating there, because what we believe is that the Russians are able to access independent news via YouTube. We had the same thing in communist Poland, where my parents were listening to Radio Wolna Europa, Radio Free Europe, and now I think it's similar. The YouTube offers a similar alternative to the Russian state-owned media, and where the ordinary Russians can access BBC or Western media outlets. So I think there is a still big role to play. As the general said, this is a very dynamic space. There is the technologies that are being used and how they are being used. We were not really thinking in such a way about these, and especially with the arrival of AI, we can see a lot of disinformation threats, a lot of deep fakes, using, for example, images of President Zelensky. One of the first use of deepfakes was just the beginning of the war, where the Russians uploaded artificially deepfake video of President Zelensky announcing that he is fleeing Kiev. So these examples are very challenging to us, because we need to somehow learn what is fact and what is not true, and what is artificially produced. But we are trying. We are trying to do that. It is not easy. And I would just end on a hopeful note that we have, even though these are very gloomy times. I'm a kid of 1990s. I was believing in the end of history, and I was really not thinking that I would see tanks rolling on European streets. But when we look from the long-term perspective, we see that Ukrainians are holding up. The war was supposed to last 1 week. It's second year now. We are defending the Ukrainian critical infrastructure. Obviously, some of it is crumbling, like the energy sector, I think it's 80% of it will destroy. Last month, the third Ukrainian telecom operator, Kyivstar, was completely shut down. But nevertheless, the society is functioning and it's capable of defending itself. And we as Google, we are committed to cooperating with the Ukrainian government. We will continue to do so, and we are listening and trying to respond to whatever the needs might be, and whatever we can help. Thank you.
Well, a child of the 90s, I'm a child of the Cold War. One not so funny story. When I was little, and the tensions were very high at various times between the United States and the Soviet Union, I used to look at the Strategic Air Command base lights over the hill and wonder when the mushroom cloud was going to come. So I'm still dealing, I guess, with some of that childhood trauma. But it is, though, a different world. I think many people did think with our peace dividend, the end of the Cold War, that everyone was saying kumbaya and we'd all get along. And that has proven not to be the case. But Maciek, partnerships, they're critical for building real world capabilities in defense and security space. And could you share with us, within the limits that you can, what has been your experience working in and with Ukraine as Palantir, and what lessons you've learned so far, and what you could share with us that we ought to be learning?
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. Very excited to be discussing these topics with you this afternoon. I think I would probably share, rather pessimistically, some of the failure modes that we've seen across our relationships in the public-private domain, not just in Ukraine, but elsewhere, in many theaters. And then I promise to end on a high and on a more optimistic note towards the end of my response. So starting with one failure mode is a tendency, I think, to delegate responsibility for things like cyber, for things like technology adoption, software adoption, to small, specific parts of an organization. That can be, customarily, that is something like procurement, it can be IT. And we've seen that as being a major failure mode where the best people in your organization, the people who are closest to the mission, don't have access to those technologies. They feel alienated. They don't feel like they have the agency to make a change and to drive change. And the same goes for cyber, not just technology, not just software. And I think if I were to draw a parallel between sort of the corporate world, imagine a corporation where printing or email privileges are limited to just a few people within their organization. I mean, that company would cease to exist. It would fail, and the best people would leave. You would have huge attrition. And eventually that company would fail, just like public-private partnerships fail if you don't democratize access to these cutting-edge tools across the organization and make everyone feel responsible for the mission at hand. So that's a failure mode that we've seen. I think conversely, other than democratizing capabilities, I think democratizing access to problems. The real sort of key missions that any organization, and I can see the general nodding, I think this is actually culturally a very difficult problem to solve. I'll give you an example to do with image or satellite imagery exploitation, for example. So what we've seen, the traditional model for an infantry commander or a platoon commander, or more specifically someone responsible for the targeting process in the front line, would be for those people to not receive satellite imagery directly, but instead they would receive a satellite an intelligence report that describes the image and then sort of issues instructions that will then be operationalized by the people at the front. We addressed this, I think, quite well in some environments by giving access to the data itself, to these images, to the front line. And how do you do that? I mean, these people aren't trained image analysts. So what you do is you train 10,000 or tens of thousands of images, use computer vision models, use detection models, and you basically empower that end user to own the problem and make a decision much more quickly than they were able to do in the past. And that's something that we've seen work very well. Obviously, the territorialism of ownership is real, and it's something that is not easy to overcome. But I think if you have the right leaders, in these organizations, people who felt the pain of slow procurement, and I think Tony, that's probably one of the first words that he learned in Polish, przetarg. I think if you have leaders in your organizations that have lived through that painful, slow procurement processes, or technologies that end up under-delivering to what was promised 3 or 4 years ago when we first started this tender process, I think those people actually make the most effective leaders in these public-private partnership models we've seen in any case. And finally, I think this is sort of us looking from the outside in. If we're looking from the inside out at what we can do to foster more innovation from the private space, and I've been confronted with the reality by another person at a conference who said that talent is now a big bad prime. So I've been at the company for 10 years. I always thought of us as a sort of plucky startup, so that was a realization for me just a couple of months ago. But I think we need to think about activating and making it easier for smaller, innovative companies. And this is something that Ambassador Chomicki said earlier. Unlike companies that produce jets and main battle tanks, cyber technology software is an industry where you don't need a multi-billion-dollar balance sheet to make a difference and to build innovative capabilities. And there are a number of things that you can do here. I mean, one is easier access to innovation programs at places like DekaBots, for example. I think you can discuss secondments between the private and public sector, where experiences can be shared, hopefully in peacetime before it becomes necessary to exploit them. We can think about making it easier for companies to obtain certifications, clearance processes. You know, for small bootstrap companies, obtaining a corporate clearance is actually a pretty significant bureaucratic burden to be able to bring their capabilities to the warfighter by means of, taking part in a cyber workshop, in a hackathon, in military exercises. And then the final point, and this is a bit of an elephant in the room, is IP ownership. There can really be no path to innovation without a sort of a financial incentive for these people to, and we always tell ourselves, we have the best engineers in the world, and that's true. We win global hackathons, we win Olympiads in mathematics and physics, we as Polish engineers. So do we have enough of these people, the people who work at the best technology companies in the world, the Googles, the Nvidias, I'll say modestly the Palantirs of the world? When these people leave these companies and found their own companies, are they incentivized to go into the dual use space, the defense space, the cyber space? I would say no. So what can we do to incentivize these people to make a difference in these sectors? And I think IP ownership is sort of a bit of an elephant in the room that is discussed oftentimes. And if you don't do anything, if the expectation remains that I, as the government, will procure the IP of this company that spent millions of dollars on R&D, then I think what you end up with is a vicious circle of companies offering consulting services, cyber body leasing, and I think where the public sector really loses out is you get the worst of both worlds. You're dependent on private sector talent on the one hand, but you're not getting any innovation in return. So those are sort of the lessons that we've seen. I started quite negatively, but there are organizations in the world. I think the Cyber Command in Poland is a great example. I think the White House Digital Service, the US DoD's Digital Innovation Unit are examples of organizations that do this actually extremely well, and there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from them.
Lessons, I think, are also something that we not only need to learn, but it's a little bit like schoolwork. You have to figure out how to apply them going forward. Ambassador Sam, Estonia is, I think, a recognized leader in digital innovation and the way it's been used in society. But to follow up on one of Maciek's point, you know, from a diplomacy, but also partnership role in Europe, in NATO, you think this digital space is someplace where the size of the country matters less than the ability to innovate and apply, and allow for smaller countries to play a disproportionate role, you know, where it's not, as pointed out, it's not how many mines do you have, how many steel mills do you have, how many tank barrels can you make, but how can you deliver value and innovation? And is that an opportunity that you think is something that is for Estonia and other countries is a path forward?
I think so. Yes, the size doesn't matter in terms of providing these services. What really matters is how well do you consolidate political will to make sure that changes happen. Because any new service needs some change. And we've been lucky enough to have fairly young politicians who were ready to listen to advisors who were suggesting that let's take digital solutions. So it's good to have been kind of spearheading this kind of digital lifestyle. Even before different companies started working out their cloud services for governments, we had our data embassy. We already then, some years ago, thought that, okay, if you need to replicate your data, and Estonia is so small that you would need to then keep these servers either on islands or by Russian border. That is a good option there. So let's take it outside. And then there were so many different other questions that we had to figure out. That, I mean, cyberspace is borderless? No. Cyberspace has borders. It has legal jurisdictions. Everywhere where the cables go through, we have to think about how the data is manipulated, or possibly manipulated or not. So there are many points on this being innovative, and we have been also advising, I think, over 130 countries in the world, to lesser or bigger extent. But the key point here is the political will in it. If you don't get that in place, then everywhere where the cables go through, we have to think about how the data is manipulated. Taking the inspiration from Estonia and went back, there are many points of things happen on this being in the whole digitalization part. I mean, we have been also advising in some questions there. But what they have done has been absolutely amazing. To lesser or bigger extent. And one other point here. But the key point here is which could be interesting. Especially if you don't get that in place. Of course, the war in Ukraine has. Ukraine is a perfect example of that. President Zelensky was given a bit of extra breathing inspiration from Estonia and went back and really made things happen in global, the whole digitalization part. Yes, we have mostly US-based companies that are providing now, but what they have also done has been absolutely. There are so many countries who even don't want to think about using. And one other point here, so which could be interesting, that actually has created more interest towards our data. The war in Ukraine has. I'm not saying that we will be competitive. Has given a bit of extra breathing for Amazon Web Services and some other companies. What we see, but this is quite interesting notion. Globally, especially, is that the vision behind the technology, mostly US-based companies that are providing now cloud services, also all the development of AI and everything. There are so many countries. It's not, we're not getting on the same level now, but it's more and more divisive. So that has created
Thinking
more
about
interest
those
towards
borders,
our data solution.
Dr. Blasha, I
I'm
want
not
to
saying that we will be competitors.
put an idea to you and see what your thoughts are.
Or
One of the reasons so many companies in the United
but this
States,
is
but also
quite
around the world, are
interesting
incorporated in the state
that
of Delaware,
globally
is the special
the
courts,
vision of
the chancery courts.
technology or
Do
thinking
things
about
quickly, do things on a focused,
We have
educated basis.
all the
not
development
where
of AI
people
and
cannot
everything else.
afford 2 years.
It's not, we're not getting on the
case to
same
wind
level
its
now,
way
but
through
it's
because it has
more and more
immediate
divisive.
economic implications. Do you think
Thinking
something
about-
along those lines, whatever you call it, maybe not a court, tribunal, rule-making body, might be needed, whether at the European level or on the national level, to really look at and at least provide temporary approvals or guidelines for some of this disruptive emerging technology? Because it takes us so long to pass this large encompassing legislation that it's like, you know, ordering a jet airplane that's outdated by the time it's delivered. So, and we all lose out. Other people who don't follow the rules, they don't care, they're gonna set their own rules. So, I mean, I know that's a stretch, particularly for the Napoleonic-based countries, but do you think there's a way legally we can find a way to enable innovation, protect rule of law and transparency? But because we certainly can't wait 5 and 10 years to legislate.
This is a really interesting question. The cynical answer would be you can do what you want, you just need a good lawyer, right? And they will push this through whatever court you might need. But I think there's much more substance to your question. It's a really interesting one. When we talk about defense technologies, there isn't a common European position as such. When you look at the AI Act, dual use is excluded. So when we look at military technologies, this is down to individual states, and I don't think we're going to change it. There is this discussion around European army. I don't think states, particularly in this moment, would be willing and able to delegate that competence in the military environment. I'm glad to come back to that one if we want to dive more deeply. But I think what you're addressing is technology more generally. What European Union has done, even though it is a regulatory superpower, we want to regulate transnationally, and as I've already mentioned, GDPR is a tremendous success. But we realize that this is half of the truth. What the European Union does is it refers to co-regulation. So what we want to see happen is we want to give guidance to Googles of the world, if you will, but we want Google to have an active role in developing specific technologies and standards. So from a legal standpoint, I would probably use the keyword of co-regulation, where it's partially law, but it's partially good practice, good business practice. We want codes of conduct, look at this information, for example. So that's the second part of the answer. And then the third part of the answer, with Minister Schubert here in the room, I'm going to say internet governance. I spend much too much time at ICANN meetings, right? Poland hosted the IGF twice. So if you look at cyberspace, I do agree there are borders, but I also agree that the Transatlantic Alliance wants one world, one internet. We're facing a splinternet scenario if we don't succeed in maintaining the multi-stakeholder model. So this is both where international law comes in. The European Cybersecurity Act puts emphasis on international law and multi-stakeholder governance. So we address these challenges not by having a specific court that's going to be very quick and very efficient, although you might try Dublin, right? But we do that through the multi-stakeholder model. So we work with 3 groups of actors, governments doing their lawyery part, doing the courts, doing the regulation, businesses helping us understand what it is. My prime example is DNS abuse. Sounds very technical, but that's what ICANN does to address cybersecurity challenges, and they do it efficiently. It sort of escapes the radar of politicians, of lawmakers, but they just do it, and it works. So you could say that the technology is able to escape the legal challenges. If done right, there is a lot of law enforcement present in that environment. And then third, I work in academia, capacity building of end users. US has this whole society approach to cybersecurity. I think I heard that somewhere in the background of your question. we need to build the competence. That's what Maciej said, right? We want everyone on board for cybersecurity. Not just one guy locked away somewhere in a secret compartment with a secret device that has all the access. No, no, no. We want everyone to be aware that clicking that link can bring everybody down in the company, right? So I don't think it's a simple answer. I don't think there is a port we can set up that's going to solve it for us. But I think we have, I'm going to go back to the toolbox. We have tools in the toolbox to address it. And they do include law, but they also include multi-stakeholderism. They include technology, also at the internet governance level. And they just include working towards a feasible solution like Estonia has done for a very long time. I'm going to stop here, but there's clearly much more. Thank you.
Well, I guess we can always hope, though, that we have a magic court that, or somebody that lets us get things done, holds us still responsible, but allows us to make progress. Because I think when everyone's not involved and concerned about the equal playing field and doing things right, then bad actors can start to shift the environment. But Marcin, if I might come back about Google, because nobody ever complains about Google. That's one of the great things here. But when you are not only looking at lessons in Ukraine, but you're looking at thinking the agility that companies like Google showed in terms of being able to continue to operate in Ukraine, to move people, to move operations, doing things. I mean, aside from the lessons from Ukraine, what lessons do you think policymakers ought to take from the business adaptability? Because as you know, many of our US investors and many others were able to move key operations, keep business continuity going, and that, incredibly complex, whether it was withdrawing things from Russia, moving operations out of Ukraine, but continuing to work, or providing work, but moving certain functions out. That I think was a test that I don't think anyone really had prepared for, but many companies did it really well. I just wonder whether or not we have that same agility sometimes in our public sector side.
Well, I think, first of all, the policymakers should listen to Dr. Kulesza. Because if you listen to some European commissioners, they, I think, will not agree with you when it comes to this co-decision process and listening to Google and shaping the legislation. But I think there is a vital role for public sector to shape legislation. And one of the examples is actually of how public sector can achieve agility is migration to cloud. One of the first things that Russians did to Ukraine was to attack their data center, the Ukrainian data centers, to destroy the public registers. And in order to prevent that, the Ukrainians very quickly adopted legislation that enabled transfer of their own data abroad and basically migrating them to cloud. And whatever you think about Google or about big techs of this world, no matter what you do, storing your data in the cloud is always safer than on-premise. And by doing this, your data is not only safe and secure, but also you can think of developing new technologies or new ways of using this data. Right now, everyone is talking about AI, so we have quite a few examples already when policymakers on different levels, local and governmental levels, are thinking how they are able to use their data for the benefit of the citizens. And for example, in Stockholm, the Swedish authorities are now doing a chatbot based on AI. So whenever a citizen is writing to a city hall or wants a new passport or a driver's license, a chatbot actually prepares a memo for a citizen. So it's not a civil servant that sits behind the desk and has to reply to a letter, but it's done automatically. So I think there are quite a few innovative examples of how we can do that. And first one would be migration to cloud. And obviously for us it's easy because we are a cloud-based company, and we are not, and other sectors are not that lucky. For example, I would imagine that manufacturing is a completely different ballgame. But nevertheless, there are ways where you can achieve this agility by basically adopting digital solutions.
But when COVID began to shut everything down, one of the things I was interested to see was talking to a lot of people who had first-year university students like my son, and which universities and which countries were able to seamlessly go to remote learning with ability to distribute documents, to submit things confidentially, to do things, versus those that couldn't. And my son's university in Amsterdam, they made the switch in a day. And I know, talking to a few other of my friends with their former classmates, it was a little more painful. So I think we need to learn that lesson of not being in the poor preparation trap. There are things we can do to prepare for contingencies, but also just to provide a certain amount of efficiency improvements. Maciek, coming back, we talked a little bit earlier, about the changing role, and I think it's been accelerated by events in Ukraine. But we were talking about the fact that it wasn't very many years ago that, for instance, in space-based imagery and different things like this, you had the CIA, some guys in Moscow, maybe a few others. Now, as we see some of these things that were previously only in the domain of the large state actors, now being in the private sector, being available to countries of all size, but also to organizations of all size. How does this change the dynamic, both in the security side, but also in other areas? I mean, Earth-based observation to look at soil and water levels and various things like that. I mean, it's something that is, it's a little bit like Google. Everything's everywhere now. I mean, so how is that going to change the way companies work with the state if the state is no longer in control of all the assets?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll try to sort of take more of a warfighting perspective, if you'll allow. Namely, sort of starting, I'd like to open with a brief statement from General Milley, the former US chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who said that Ukraine's use of AI and software more broadly, AI-driven software, is the single biggest change in the character of war in recorded history. And I think that really is something that speaks to the impact that AI, and I'll talk a little bit about the image side of things as well. I think UAVs, the ubiquity and the falling prices of these have completely changed the strategic assumptions that we had just a few years ago. Going back to AI, I think the common misconception is that this is some kind of fandangled future thing that we can, if we don't think about it, it will go away, or it's a problem for future generations. It isn't. The truth is, these capabilities are being deployed and used in every single theater in the world today. And I think if we ignore it as the West, and I'll sort of take the liberty of speaking as the West here, if we ignore it, we risk being left behind, and I think the ramifications of that can be tragic for us. On that very optimistic note, let me see, I'll talk about some highlights actually, and some things that have changed for the better. So if you look at things like GPT, Midjourney, these sort of customer-facing or public-facing applications of AI, generative AI, they've really changed the paradigm and raised expectations as far as software is concerned. That means these technologies work at scale, and they work today. So where historically, and Tony, you mentioned this, we go through a procurement process and I start to scope and procure a piece of software. By the time I put it to use in practice 3 or 4 years down the line, I almost expect it to be obsolete. I almost expect it to not be fit for purpose. And I think generative AI and these technologies have really put that on its head. The expectation now is that these things work. And if you're not delivering, you're going to be found out by the market. I think that's one thing to bear in mind. The pace of technological change, Dr. Kulesza alluded to that as well. I think many people are still trying to put the genie back in the bottle. On the sort of legal side, on the regulatory side, Europe is very much reverting to type, talking about regulation more than capabilities. But I think on the technological side, what we're seeing is the risks that we're running are still thinking about modern technology in the context of old, sort of outdated doctrinal requirements, if you like. So we still think of, how am I going to make this new technology work with the assumptions that I know now? And I think that's a big mistake. To use a couple of examples, you mentioned satellite imagery. In 2008 or 9, I think there were about 150 EO sensors above our heads that were able to take pictures. We now, just 15 years later, we have enough constellations. We have, I think, 10 times the capacity to take images, satellite images, by commercial companies. They are of twice the quality, and they cost about a fifth of the price that they cost just a few years ago, which I think empowers smaller actors, and I think this has allowed Ukraine, along with AI, to bridge the qualitative gap that it has to our common adversary. On the drone side, very briefly, I think if you look at 3 or 4 years ago, a UAV capable of carrying high quality optics would have been $2,000 or $3,000. So there was no doctrinal assumption of running sort of drone suicide missions, right? Where you are essentially counting on 90% of your drones, an attrition rate of 90% because it was way too expensive. I think now you're looking at a drone that costs a tenth of the price, and I think facilitating that by biasing towards action and deployment of modern technology and not trying to predict what your adversary is going to be like in the face of dynamic adversarial capabilities. Russia's learning. They are a very different adversary to the one that they were 2 years ago, in much the same way that Ukraine is a very different fighting force to the one that it was 3 years ago in 2014. So I think my takeaway, I think it's a weapon that we can yield. I think that democratization of assets and data is actually a very good thing that makes us a more formidable fighting force if need be in the future.
Well, I can recall many years ago in Poland, and of course it's changed a lot, when I went to the countryside and my wife's friend's brother came over. He had a few drinks and he says, I've got to go back to the police station. He was a policeman. His wife says, I've got the clip. They had one clip for the whole police station and he had to take it back. They didn't share the bullets, only one, and I think this is the way it's been with a lot of technology in the past. It's been very siloed, it's very, very controlled, and very often the people who needed technology didn't have access to it, or at least not access to it in a timely fashion. And now it's a whole different game. But General Milewski, based on what you've been hearing from folks, if you have any reactions on that or any key takeaways. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you on is that, do you think we in our NATO countries truly understand the assets that we have, because that are in the private sector, the public sector, and really understand not only in the direct cyber and digital space, but all the supporting areas around? We spoke briefly about whether it's power grids or critical infrastructure or those things. That again, none of this operates alone in a standalone these days. But I think one of the lessons, at least I've seen from Ukraine, is the willingness to use whatever is available, be it in a company, be it in a public sector, and combine it for effective use. And I'm just wondering whether or not we are auditing ourselves enough in our Western democracies to truly understand all the capabilities that we have that could be deployed to either deter or protect.
Where do I start? I made a lot of notes to answer some of your questions, of course, because some of you asked questions about the strategic approach and the use of technologies for gaining the advantage. And I say that in terms, if you observe Ukraine, and they have opposed a military force, and we all, I think, in the first stages of the war, I think we have been afraid that they will lose. So they invented their own way of fighting the opposing side. And I say that if you try to oppose such military power as Russia, you have to come up with a genius idea how to deploy the military force in your own very specific way. That's why we've observed and we watched the movies when they use drones with hand grenades, and they use the hand grenades going inside the tanks. Yeah, and actually the US side, they've tried this. So the US Special Forces in the early stages of 2000s, they come up with an idea. So one of the commanders said, here's the $50, go and find me a drone, a grenade, and try to put this grenade on the head of one of the soldiers. So, so the Western world have done it. We've tested, it's doable, and it's very efficient to use very primitive weapons with a new technology, commercially available, a very cheap technology to use on your own benefit. But having said that, I think that in terms of technology, the Western world is winning. But the problem with the Western world is that we made everything so complex because of the law, the ethics of many things going around it being politically correct, I say. So I'm not pointing to the other side, but in terms of AI, I always observe how the other possible opposing sides are working with the technology. And if you look for their doctrines and their way of thinking about AI, they are not caring about your data, personal data. They're just working with the models. They are using all the brain power or the computational power to develop models or on their benefits. And I've looked through the drone-based systems and a swarm of new drones that have been developed in China and in US and in the other countries that show new capabilities on the battlefield. And actually, I think that, of course, the US is the most advanced force in that manner, but I think that the way of thinking about introducing the algorithms and the software to, first of all, make decisions about killing somebody, it's very, very, I say, not only from my side, promising capability in terms of military, but in majority cases, it's very non-ethical. So the first country that will try to use algorithms for their benefit, or on their benefit in the battle space, will gain advantage in the newest and the nearest conflicts to come. And when we say that on-prem versus cloud approach, it's you say it's more resilient for sure, but I say, and this is the additional outcome from the Ukrainian conflict. In the first stages of conflict, the political and the strategic military decision makers, they always try to identify the laws that should be disabled for the military to be efficient. So if you look closely for the spectrum of the actions that the Ukrainians take in the first stage of conflict, they disabled certain laws for their resilience and their system resilience to be developed. So they turn out the law that required them and obliged them to reside the data on their soil. They completely changed the law with the classified data actions, and this is the major problem in case of European countries and our policies. At the moment, the NATO is working with the laws and the technical mechanism that should be introduced into the cloud, into our systems, for us to use the cloud for classified data processing. So we are only, at the moment, we are developing our policies in that matter. We do not allow any classified data outside of our secure on-prem server rooms. And this is at the moment, the major, I say, not the drawback, but the major challenge to solve. So, of course, I have written down the idea about the data embassies, and having data embassies outside of a country is one way of thinking. The other way of thinking is securing your data to be so agile across the cloud-based environments, so nobody actually catches the data. For us, perhaps controversial, to deploy a data on Russian or Chinese soil for security is perhaps one of the best way of thinking about the data, about the services. Yeah? But having said that, I think that actually a lot of things about the processing power, about the systems, the working with the data, with the models, is actually ongoing in NATO and European countries. We are working with the policies, we are trying to develop our new ways of thinking about changing the law, and this is of course, the challenge and way for us to cooperate with the legal and the people from the law departments to help us prepare ourselves for the future, for the use of classified data in the environments best suited for resilience in our systems. And actually, this is one of the major obstacles or major challenges that we are working in cybercom in Poland, to be prepared, to change, to perhaps envision the future technologies, how to change the technology, how to change the approach for our counterintelligence people for the certification and the accreditation process, to be prepared, but of course to be very, and I stated very clearly, be cyber resilient within our systems. Because this is, I represent the IT and IT security, and the people from the cyber domain always say that, remember, in terms of military systems and military data, the availability of the data is the latter. The first idea, the major point to solve and to secure is actually the security of the data. Because, of course, you must remember that we are working with highly classified data. And you said previously that, and it's good, in terms of the availability of commercial services, remember that the satellite pictures taken from the, let's say, CIA or any other satellites, intelligence satellites, those were only available for the intelligence community. At the moment, many commercial services serve this data in real time, and it's good, because as a military, we need to just try to learn how to use this data on our benefits. So if I use this unclassified data and I attribute the data with the proper attribution, recognition, and of course recon in the data, this is the first stage of the data being classified. And one of the questions I got from our military intelligence people is the question I asked them: if I work with the model with the classified data, do I make the model classified? And actually, this is one of the questions we have been asked, and it's not a simple answer to develop at the moment.
Only for me, I know we're at time, pretty much over now, but to Marcin's point earlier, I think an interesting question that we won't have time to discuss at length now is what point, I mean, the question that we're asking about, security, cyber, I think we're asking the wrong question to some extent. We should be saying, can I afford not to deploy to the cloud? Can I afford not to have that capability? And I think there comes a point when not having the capability is more detrimental to your capabilities as a warfighting force and to your security more generally than having the capability, than not having it and sort of being very secure. I think that there's a tipping point at which not having a capability that we perceive to be less secure is actually less secure than having it.
To answer this question is that this is why we ask Google and the Microsoft and of course AWS, please bring us technology connected with the sovereign cloud. That's why we are, in terms of technology, and I speak with the technical people and aspects connected with the technology. Remember that we know how to prepare our systems to be ready for the deployment and the landing in the cloud. And this is the crucial capability to have within our system.
Well, I'd like to thank you all, and just so David and as Dentons, and thank you, David, and also for the Atlantic Council to think about the next round. We didn't really touch on cyber militias, the reports from the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, which I highly recommend that every country have one that is literally thinking about all the scenarios and the audits. I know that it exists in varying degrees to varying countries, but I think all of us could really look at that. The important role of cybersecurity in protecting not just civil society, but civil morale, keeping the ATMs on in the Ukraine, making sure that when the power blackout happened, they could still see the football match because it was on the app on the phone. So these are seeming like small things, but absolutely vital to civilian and national resilience to realize that you're still in the game and you're still going. Spillover effect, hacktivism, preventive tools about segmented networks and zero trust rules. So there's several more times I will let Dentons host us again. But for today, I think a lot of interesting discussion about the lessons that we're learning from Ukraine and the things that we still need to work on. So to our panelists, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for your time. And thank you all for coming today.